Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Raw podcast. My name's James Copley from the Sunderland Echo. Delighted to be joined today by my friend and colleague Alex Miller from the Sheffield Star. We're going to be previewing the Sheffield Wednesday game against Sunderland at Hillsborough on Friday. Alex, how you doing, mate? Nice to see you.
Yeah, and you, James. Yeah, I'm all right. I'm all right. Looking forward to Friday night lights yet again. Two on the bounce for Wednesday, and a nice clear weekend that comes with it, come what may. So always a bonus.
Absolutely. Let's dive straight into it, shall we? We'll take a little look at Sheffield Wednesday's season so far. It was a little bit of a slow start, wasn't it? Obviously, lost 4-0 to Sunderland right at the beginning of the season. I thought possibly the potential to struggle, but they've turned it back round, haven't they?
Yeah, I think there was a big onus on Wednesday changing their playing style from last season to this. And I think that was reflected in those first few games heading into the first international break. The first day of the season, they beat Plymouth 4-0 at Hillsborough, sold out stadium. Everyone's talking, at what stage is the title going to be confirmed? And then back to earth with a big old bump up at the Stadium of Light, and those results did sort of carry through for the next couple. They played away at Millwall, lost 3-0, barely got a kick, and that was the game that was leading into the international break. And there was definitely a change there, and Danny Röhl sort of looked at it along with his coaching staff and sort of went back to basics just a little bit. It wasn't mass changes, but certainly in terms of the system that they were using, and some of that stuff from the early days has now been drip fed, I should say, sort of later on in the season. But perhaps it was a case of running before they can walk. But yeah, things have they've had good runs, they've had bad runs, they've had inconsistent runs, and I think that sort of reflects in their placing in the table at the minute.
So what sort of generally and tactically has changed then since that 4-0 loss at the Stadium of Light?
Yeah, well, as I say, the system, they've sort of moved a couple more maybe into the midfield areas. The system's very fluid, and as I say, a lot of that stuff that we were seeing and that perhaps wasn't working at the start of the season, that very start of the season, has been sort of drip fed in as things have gone on. I think you'll see, depending on how they want to set up, you'll see sort of the fullbacks being sort of inverted and coming into a number 6, which frees up the midfield players to go further forward. It's a nightmare picking out what system and what have you they're playing, because it's a constant moving feast. And Wednesday have been known to sort of change their system and loose formation 3-4 times in a match. So I think that's sort of testament to Danny Röhl's sort of tactical acumen, and also, as I say, in the brighter periods of results, it's been testament to the players on picking that up eventually. But yeah, looking back to those early weeks, perhaps it was a little bit too much to begin with.
I find it an interesting game. Obviously, Sunderland's form has slumped a little bit. The automatics look a little way off now. When Sunderland played Sheffield Wednesday at the Stadium of Light, I felt like Sheffield Wednesday sort of came out to play against Sunderland, and a lot of teams made that mistake early on against Sunderland. I think we've now seen teams almost work them out a little bit, and they will go on a low block, they will look to frustrate, and they will look to sort of counter-attack. I'll be interested to see, Alex, whether Danny Röhl sort of really capitalises on that, because although it's been a very good season for Sunderland, it has stalled in the past sort of 5 games, I would say.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I watched the Leeds game and obviously keep a close eye on the results of you guys. Feels like there's kindred spirits between Wednesday and Sunderland in many ways. Rocky relationship maybe in the League One years and Patrick Roberts and all that, but we'll skim past that. But yeah, I think so. Look, we've seen that in certain games where Wednesday, certainly in the first half of matches, have looked to sort of nullify and sit in a little bit deep, and it's got them results. In the second half, when the onus is on the other team to sort of step out, that's when Wednesday can make them pay. And we've seen several games this season where Wednesday have got a result, a win. Certainly in the games away from home with 35% possession, and they've hit them on the break, and they are a very athletic and in some areas very pacey side. And it's in the likes of, Michael Smith's got 8 goals this season. Big Newcastle fan, by the way. He's got 8 goals this season, and I think 6 of them have been from the bench. And a stat that's bouncing around Wednesday Twitter is that Wednesday are the team in the Championship with the most goals that have come from substitutes. And I think that sort of speaks to how the match plan, and it's a very highly technical setup that Danny Rill's put together. The second half of games is where Wednesday have hurt teams essentially. So I would sort of half expect. Look, it's impossible to tell. Wednesday can surprise with how they go about things. But if I was to put a lazy fiver down, I'd say Wednesday sit in for the first half, make their subs in the second, and try and nick a win.
It's interesting that, isn't it? Because a lot of teams at home, the onus is maybe on them to go and attack the game and have a bit more possession. And Sunderland actually, over the course of this season, have benefited from that away from home. But it doesn't sound like Wednesday to you will go down that route, Alex.
Yeah, possibly not. Look, like I say, trying to second guess Sheffield Wednesday is a very difficult task. So it could be that they come out 8 strikers and go for it. You know what I mean? But look, if you look at the home and away league tables in the Championship, that tells a story. Wednesday have sort of in the bottom 6, I think that's still correct. In terms of their home form, which for Sheffield Wednesday is an unusual thing. Hillsborough's usually a very difficult place to come. In years gone by, they've gone on long unbeaten runs there. And it's since the turn of the year, I was looking at some of the numbers last night in terms of performance and XG, and you can put as much value on those sort of things as you like. Wednesday's home form in terms of performance since the turn of the year has been outstanding. They're hitting XGs of 2.5, quite regularly. They're not putting the ball in the net, and they're making mistakes at the back. And anyone that saw the games against Luton or against Coventry more recently, there's big errors being made that are costing them, and they are creating chances and they are getting shots off. They're not hitting the net, and this is what Danny Rill sort of spoken about a number of times about quality in both boxes and doing it in both boxes, because you can be as attractive and play as free-flowing football as you like between those 18-yard boxes. But that's where it really counts, clearly.
Take us through the manager's impact on this club, Alex, because from an outsider's perspective, he looks an excellent coach. I'm always struck by his personality as well. I mean, I looked up from my laptop at the Stadium of Light in the press room, and Danny Rose stood over me going for a handshake, and he went around the room. He seems like a very classy guy, very well spoken. He genuinely feels like the full package, and dare I say, with respect to Sheffield Wednesday, probably destined for the Premier League at some point.
I'd go further than that. I think one day in years to come, I'll be filing stories on how ex-Sheffield Wednesday manager Danny Rose got on in the Champions League. I really do. He's so tactically astute, very, very talented, very, very driven. That's what's driven me. Very, very ambitious. It makes no bones about things that he wants in sort of the public domain, which I think has contributed to fractious relationships, I think, with some of the people up top. But yeah, very, very talented. I mean, the way that he came in, the Wednesday that he walked in on was broken.
Yeah.
14 matches, including 2 Carabao Cup ties with League Two opposition, without a win in 90 minutes. A side that just looked absolutely appalling, without a win, the worst start to a Championship season in its history, and managed to stay up with a win at the Stadium of Light, obviously last season in really, really impressive circumstances. Getting that team scoring was, the work of a magician, let alone getting them winning games. And it was an incredible season to cover. This season, obviously expectations are raised. The form guide from when Danny stepped into the club to the end of the season had them, playoff form really. And after that first day win against Plymouth, as I say, it was, people were booking hotels for Wembley and all sorts. So it's been a bit of a bumpier ride this time, but there's plenty of reasons for that, and I think it's fair to say that one of them is not, Danny Rill's tactical acumen. I think it'll go very far in the game.
Are you surprised in a way, Alex, that he's still at Hillsborough? Just thinking back to the summer, there was a lot of noise around him. Some of it coming from Wearside as well. When Sunderland were without a manager, I know there was a little bit of interest from Southampton. That probably would have been a bad move to make at that time. Obviously, earlier on in the season, what's made him stay at Sheffield Wednesday? Do you think
the compensation price tag hanging above his head
always comes down to money, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. In this bitter world that we live in, James. Yeah, I don't think it's any massive secret that Danny Röhl would probably be a Southampton manager now. Had the compensation not been too high, we gather that in the summer that was something that put other clubs off as well, potentially even up your neck of the woods. And like I say, he's an ambitious manager. He does love Sheffield Wednesday. He said that, he enjoys the idea of the project that he's got there. That he's got an incredible connection with the fan base. I think with Southampton, part of the reason that was such a drive for he'd worked there before. He was Ralph Hasenhüttl's assistant manager, and obviously the lure of the Premier League and a step up in facilities, infrastructure, playing staff. The list is endless, So yeah, I think I wouldn't say he's desperately unhappy at Sheffield Wednesday. That there's question marks over the relationship between him and the higher up, I should say. And yeah, that I think going forward, that's something that needs to continue to be mended. But he signed a contract until 2027. There's a hefty compensation fee in there. And I think it'll be over to whichever club it might be to sort of test the waters on that when it comes to it.
Let's talk about that higher up, because I've been stunned by some of your coverage in the best possible way this season. like you with Sunderland, I keep a keen eye on Sheffield Wednesday. We've known each other for a long time now. Been to Sheffield and Hillsborough a couple of times. Obviously, Joe Cran as well, your colleague. So, and playing Sheffield Wednesday in the playoffs, the League One days, two clubs that were too big for that division and then sort of became rivals, didn't they? So I always keep an eye out. But what struck me is the coverage a couple of months ago, whenever it was, of the Chancery talking with the fans, and the nuggets that came from that were just extraordinary. One story in particular caught my eye that you shared on your social media was a player being recalled from loan and the owner not being aware, making a phone call and then confirming to the fans in attendance that was actually the case. And again, what strikes me in your coverage after that is that Danny Röhl says that he doesn't really talk to the chairman. It seems like an extraordinary sort of set of events in Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, from what we can gather, that they are on at least workable talking terms now. So I wouldn't like to speculate too much on, excuse me, on where the relationship is at, at this moment in time. Certainly when that fan forum was held, middle of January, they hadn't spoken for a while, shall we say. And obviously in the middle of an important January transfer window, that put obstacles in the way, because Danny's the one that ultimately has the sign off on the players, and Chancery is the one that signs the checks, and Chancery's lying a couple of times as well. He's not come to me, he's not spoken to me. He can't need anything in this transfer window. It all felt a little bit childish. The balance on blame on both sides. It depends on what sort of story you want to believe and how much you put into the fan forum, how much you put into Danny's press conferences. But yeah, it was an extraordinary evening and not particularly unusual for Sheffield Wednesday. He's done a few of these fan forums that tend to go on for a long time. When I stumbled out of Hillsborough about 1 a.m.
It was an incredible shift you put in. I couldn't believe some of the stuff I was reading, and not to go too in depth, but I had a quick look at the figures as well. I think at the time, just obviously working for the company we work for, we can track everything, and the interest in those particular stories were just off the map.
Yeah, absolutely. Gave us a nice little boost in a January transfer window where Wednesday weren't particularly doing anything. So I'd like to thank the chairman for that personally. But yeah, I mean, the sort of the gossipy line is obviously the relationship between the manager and the chairman. But one thing that has sort of fallen out from that fan forum is a back and forth he had with members of a protest group. It was against Sunderland, I think, one of the protests not long ago. And what came out of that was, in not so many words, will you go and find me a buyer then? If you want me to sell, you go and find me a buyer. And I know that a couple of the supporters involved in that sort of movement have been in conversations with people claiming to be wealthy, claiming to be interested in buying a football club, and it's an absurd situation. It really is. And as I say, not entirely out of character for Sheffield Wednesday. It's been a crazy club to cover for the last few years.
Big question to answer, and I appreciate you haven't got a crystal ball, but where do you think it all ends with Chancery? Because Sheffield Wednesday is such a big club. When that stadium's going, it's an absolutely incredible place to be. A football club in a big city as well, with a ready-made rival there. The history's there of the club. It feels to me like a little bit of a sleeping giant, really, in a sense, not dissimilar to how Sunderland have been.
Yeah, I think so. The potential's there, and it is. There'd probably be a few red-tinted specs wearers that would argue this, but the bigger club in the city, and there's probably a generation of people that don't appreciate that because of what United have done getting into the Premier League and their association with players that have gone on to play with England and what have you. The frustration is that it's not been run to its full capacity, and that's why you see a wave every now and again of protests. There's yet to be a proper sustained sort of actionable movement from the supporters, despite the interests of one or two that have tried to make it so. Where it goes, it's a good question. He's a difficult man to pin down. I think a question that I've asked him a couple of times is, what are you in it for at this stage? You came in, you spent incredible amounts of money. You continue to fund the club. It's costing him somewhere in the region of £8 million a year just to keep Sheffield Wednesday going. That's coming out of his pocket, and you can't deride him for that. This isn't a Reading situation. I just don't know what he's getting out of it at this point. There's a lot of hate that comes his way. He's made statements on things that have been said against him and his family, obviously absolutely abhorrent. And at the moment, you're sort of looking at it as a football fan or a football journalist, and you're looking at it and going, it's going to take something absolutely extraordinary for Sheffield Wednesday to get in the Premier League. Parachute payments and clubs with better infrastructures and better structures in place to sort of sell, reinvest. It's all stuff that Wednesday have never done. They're as close as perhaps some people would expect them in terms of having a chance with Danny at the helm. If Wednesday can keep hold of Danny next season, there's certainly a lot more to build on if they can have a successful summer. And I think that's always been the end game for Chancery, to get into the Premier League and perhaps sell up at that point. Who knows? He's a difficult man to pin down, James, as I say, and where it ends, hell knows.
I guess the worry is that Sheffield Wednesday have got really quite a good manager and have struck gold. But if he were to leave, then the sort of the nature of the hierarchy at the club we've seen when they don't get that managerial appointment right. I'm thinking after Darren Moore that it can go south very, very quickly, and you are a Danny roll away from going down to League One again. And Sunderland saw it last season with Michael Beale. We're in terrible form. Relegation form towards the back end of the season. If it wasn't for the points accrued under Tony Mowbray at the beginning of the season, we would have been further down the table than we were.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's made good appointments, across his time. Carlos Carvajal, if you go back a decade or so, felt to be the right man at the right time in terms of his personality and picking up a club that was on its way up. It has to be said there've been some horrible appointments in there as well. Jos Lukai, Cisco Munoz, And so, yeah, you're rolling the dice again, I think. And look, he should be commended. He takes a lot of criticism for the Cisco and Jos Lukai and Gary Monk to an extent, and certainly Tony Pulis. He takes a lot of
Forgot all
criticism.
about that.
Yeah, well,
Steve
so did
Bruce
I.
as well. He had, didn't he?
That was a long 6 weeks, let me tell you. But yeah, and so he should be commended for what has been an outstanding appointment in Danny Rill. But if he were to leave at some stage, then as I say, you are rolling the dice once again.
We'll go back to current affairs. I did think that, sort of based on the form a couple of weeks ago, that Sheffield Wednesday were going to really push towards the playoffs, but it seems to have dropped off a bit, Alex. They're down in 13th place again now.
Yeah, the points difference is still, there to be gone at. I think it's difficult. You're always looking at this run of fixtures for Wednesday and thinking, I mean, Danny said this himself, if you can stay in touch, getting onto the other side of the international break in March, then Wednesday we'll have a chance. The fixtures on the other side of that look a little bit more gentle. There's some Hillsborough games where you can really see a sellout and a proper roaring Sheffield Wednesday crowd, which is always very powerful. But this is the block of fixtures, and going to Burnley and playing so well, in the first half, they were the better team at Turf Moor. How many teams can go and say that? And then losing 4-0, it through some lax defending and a complete inability to finish the chances, which we've touched on before. So you're looking at the Sunderland game, and then you've got the derby. Which no one should be looking forward to on either side of the divide. They're just horrible, horrible games. But that's the last game leading into the international break. But I think the interesting bit is you've got Plymouth away and Norwich away in 4 days, which for a northern club, as you guys will understand, presents its challenges. And you've got that leading into the derby. So you're always looking at this block. Look, if they can scrape, maybe a couple of wins down there, if they can get a point here or there, who knows? They could go and win the derby. Then, yeah, things could get reignited. At the same time, you look at those fixtures, you think they're very difficult. We could be sat here in the international break Wednesday, 12 points off, and wondering where it all went wrong.
And that's when it becomes a real struggle from a coverage point of view, isn't it? Just to keep motivated and keep those fingers tapping, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. The numbers sort of go down, and
yeah, I experienced that last season.
Yeah. But there'll always be something around the corner at Sheffield Wednesday, mate. There'll be another fan forum or something to keep us interested. Yeah,
I can imagine. How are things looking in terms of injuries, Alex?
Low at the back, very, very light at the back. Akinfenmewa and Domai Orfa are both out. For the next few weeks, they're both on long-term injuries. Coming out of the January transfer window, a lot of the talk were, they desperately needed a centre-half. First game out of the January transfer window, Dishon Bernard injures his knee and is out for the rest of the season. So, they're currently going with Michael Ahekwa, who's a very experienced centre-half, who, for my money, has been very good, but was probably 5th or 6th choice at the start of the season. He's leading that defensive line now with Max Lowe, who's ordinarily a left back, but again has done well sort of in the centre of a back four. Lean there. Anthony Masaba's not expected to play. He's out with an injury. Oh, you test me now, James, off the top of my head.
Is Barry Bannon still out?
Barry Bannon is back.
Is he back
expect him to play with a support of sorts under his knee. He's played the last couple of games. He's played, I think, 90 minutes in both of those games. So initially, I think it was expected that he was going to be out for a lot longer than he has done, but he's done what Barry Bannon does and sort of strapped himself up and wheeled himself out there.
Absolutely. Well, we'll tail the podcast off, but just let me know what your prediction is coming into the game, Alex. I ask this because it always feels like something happens when these two sides play each other. I remember in League One going down there and getting absolutely spanked under Lee Johnson. I can't remember the final score. I think it might have been 3-0 or something. There's obviously the two playoff games. Every game between the two in League One took on added importance. Obviously, the game towards the back end of last season, Sunderland were just so bad, and Sheffield Wednesday were riding the crest of a wave. And then coming into the game at home this season, I don't think anybody really expected Sunderland to win 4-0 at the time. So I always feel like there's a bit of drama when these two meet.
Yeah, two proper clubs in it, and I think it attracts a big spotlight, no matter what division they're in. Certainly it was the case in League One. You're going to ask me for a prediction, aren't you?
Just how you'll feel at the end of the game. You don't have to go specifics. Win, lose, draw, it doesn't matter. Just sort of an overview. You can go as in on it as you want to, Alex.
You give me a bit of rope to hang myself with. I think from a Wednesday perspective and being optimistic, the one thing that Wednesday have done consistently under Danny Röhl is jump back from big defeats. And just at the moment that everyone's writing them off and saying, well, this isn't going to happen or that's going to happen, they'll pull a result out of nowhere. So I'll optimistically go with a score draw. I think Wednesday at home have struggled to keep clean sheets. I'll go for a 1-1. Is Patrick Roberts going to be involved or?
Well, he played the last game and he's not injured, but he might be rotated out. You never know. Sometimes if there's a player that's going to be rotated out, it's Patrick Roberts. But obviously he loves it against Wednesday, doesn't he?
I was about to say, well, he'll come off the bench and get a last minute equaliser. So I'll go for 1-1 with the Patrick Roberts goal.
Well, Sunderland have lost 2 on the bounce against Leeds. Who did we play last? I'm blanking.
Hull?
Yeah, Hull. Yeah, sorry.
I'm doing your job for you, Jay.
I know. I've already erased it from the memory bank because it was that bad. So we've lost against Hull and Leeds last 2. I think Sunderland are probably in the worst form of the season. I'm actually predicting a Sheffield Wednesday win. I think Sunderland season's going to get a little bit worse before it gets better, and then hopefully they'll pick up towards the playoffs. But Alex, tell me a little bit more about the Sheffield Star and where Sunderland fans can find any information on the Owls in the build-up to the game.
Yeah, we're on thestar.co.uk. Check us out on our socials. I'm at Alex Miller 91. My colleague Joe's on at, this is a bit at Yes We Cran. So yeah, just find us on there. We've got a few bits going up, and we'll have a fair bit of preview going up in the next couple of days as well.
Brilliant. Thanks for joining me, Alex. And obviously you can head over to the Sunderland website for all of the latest ahead of the Sheffield Wednesday game. Check out the Sheffield Star as well. Thank you very much